The Cash Paymaster Services lawyers have written to Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng, saying that they're cash-strapped and urgently require an income for June. CPS says it's unable to invoice Sassa and has therefore not been paid by Treasury or Sassa for services rendered since the 1st of April this year. For more on the story now, eNCA's Erin Bates is in studio. Thanks for coming in, Erin. Okay, give us some background on the story. Is there some valid concern here, given that CPS is the same company we've seen in the news for the sheer amount of money it's made off of this very contract?
Well, firstly, the social grant sort of contract is a bulk, it's a key part of CPS's business. And if you read some of the information on their website to their investors and the like, you get that very clearly. What is important here is this concerns the social grants paid in cash to almost 3 million people. And while this is a crisis, there is also a tussle going on between CPS and Treasury over the rate Treasury will give CPS to pay cash social grants for the 6-month extension which the Constitutional Court ordered should happen in March. So the tactics here potentially around wheeling and dealing and negotiating a desirable fee is important to keep in mind, but also that CPS has genuine operational concerns and financial strain at this point because it says on the lawyer's letter they are down in terms of their cash reserves.
So when was this lawyer's letter written, given that it's now saying it can't pay grants for June? I mean, it's very short notice.
It is. It was sent to the Office of the Chief Justice on the 23rd of May, so earlier this week. They say they need the money by the 27th because that's when they begin their work to do cash grant payments from the 1st of June. We have approached Treasury to ask for their comment on the issue, and also Sassa. The spokesperson for Sassa has committed to do an interview with eNCA later today, and I have also asked for comment from CPS. But it is important to remember here that whatever the kind of business wheeling and dealing that may be going on, it really does put in jeopardy or sort of play and toy with the fate of almost 3 million cash social grant beneficiaries.
Can we read into this that perhaps the very issue you talk about here, the livelihoods of these people who really depend on these social grants, might be being used to negotiate?
It's possible. I mean, you don't want to veer too much into the kind of territory of speculation, but what we have seen repeatedly is that at the 11th hour, parties will approach the Constitutional Court, for example, to seek extensions for contracts with CPS, or in this case, CPS approaching the head of the court saying right before they need to begin their work for the June payouts, we need help, we don't have money. But then again, we do understand that because of how the order was handed down in March, the court did say to CPS, you and Treasury can and must talk about your rate for these cash social grant payments going forward. So at the time of the March ruling, they said the existing contract overpaying social grants remains as is, but under this order, CPS does have the opportunity to go to National Treasury and discuss how it's going to pay cash social grants going forward. And from what I understand, speaking to members of CPS and also Grindrod Bank, the broader contract CPS had before, which included cash social grants and other kinds of social grants using the cards and banks and so on, meant that it had more money to render services. So now with that income minimized and actually not existent at all at this point, it has less resources to disperse its services for Sassa.
So what does CPS now want? The court, it wants the court once again to intervene here and talk to Treasury directly.
Well, it's asked for one of two things. The first is to refer to a request from the 11th of May, which is an affidavit I still need to source. The alternative is permission from Mogoeng to approach the court over its negotiations with National Treasury. So again, in a way, referring to the courts and the Constitutional Court to intervene, to be a referee, to kind of oversee this process between different parties linked to social grant payments.
All right, so there are a number of outstanding questions here. You have an interview with the Social Grants Agency a little later on this afternoon. And what about speaking to CPS directly, just getting more detail?
Yes, so we have contacted the spokesperson for CPS, shown them the letter, which they obviously will know about since it's from their lawyers to the Constitutional Court, and asked for comment on specific issues. And one of the key questions I have asked of them is, what do they mean by services rendered? Because we heard before that it was chiefly around these almost 3 million cash social grant payments, but that CPS was still providing IT infrastructure for other services. And of course, there were testimonies in the inquiry into Batabile Dlamini that she was preferential about CPS continuing to do work for Sassa. Since Minister Susan Shabangu has come in, she's been very vocal about not giving CPS any leeway, any slack to continue working with Sassa. But in the meantime, we have this constitutional court order saying for the next 6 months at least, CPS has a constitutional duty to pay social grants in cash.
And of course,
there are many elements at play.
Of course, we have all of those people who depend to live on the payments from social grants.
We do.
All right, well, thanks very much for that. Our reporter, Erin Bates, is tracking the story very closely for us, and she'll be updating the channel throughout the day as the story develops. Cash Paymaster Services, their lawyers writing to the Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, Mogoeng Mogoeng, saying that they are cash-strapped and they urgently require an income for the month of June.